Alrighty, let's get started. The first story actually comes from, it's an opinion piece from Yahoo Finance, and Station F, France's FU to London's Fintech hub. Station F is a €250 million statement of France's tech ambitions, and apparently Britain should be worried, according to Yahoo Finance. Opened in June 2017, Station F is the world's largest startup incubator. It's a 34,000 square meter former train depot, and it's home to more than 1,000 startups. As well as providing a focal point for the French tech scene, it also acts as a statement of ambition. France wants to become the #1 country for tech in Europe. And could Brexit be playing in here? Hiroki, are you thinking London's lost it? Is it gone?
I don't know. I don't see it that way. I think we opened up an office in Paris last year. And we've been, active in that market for a while now. So we've been there a bunch of times over the last few years. And you can definitely feel it, right? It's changed a lot. It's growing really quickly. And in many ways, Paris feels very similar to how London felt maybe 5 years ago. But then if you look at what London felt like 8 years ago, 9 years ago, when we first started, everything's growing a lot, right? So I don't think it's necessarily a winner-takes-all situation here. And clearly, the stuff we're doing with Brexit makes things complicated, and I'm pretty sure we've shot ourselves in the foot a little bit. But I don't think it's going to be the end of one and the rise of the other. I think there will be tech hubs all around the world.
That's pretty interesting, and I guess a view hopefully echoed by many, but certainly I feel a sense of foreboding doom as we approach this never-ending uncertainty. Chris, you view it now, I guess, from a home further away. How do you view it with a little bit more distance from across the pond?
Yeah, it's actually really interesting coming back. So I moved to New York 8 years ago now, and at the time, the London tech scene was like really just starting. There was Tech Hub on Old Street Roundabout, and that was about it. And there was Silicon Soho, which are a bunch of parties in Soho during the summer. And then I moved to New York, and there was this much more developed scene. And I see it in a very similar way to your point, which is New York's developed and London's developed. And I spent today going and meeting with 5 of the biggest fintech folks here. And there is incredible stuff happening here today that just wasn't happening 7 or 8 years ago. The funding environment, the innovation environment, and hopefully it's Paris's turn. And I don't think it's a zero-sum game. Like I think there's opportunity for innovation, whether in the same field or different fields, to grow all over the place.
It's interesting. Every time I talk to techies, the view that it's not a zero-sum game seems to come up. So let's ask some bankers. Is it a zero-sum game, do you think, Solange, or do you really think there's opportunity here? Rising tide lifts all.
So I'm slightly conflicted because I was kind of born and grew up in Paris. And then I moved to London, studied here, and my entire working life has been here, although some back and forth to Paris. Look, I think you'd hope it's more than a zero-sum game. There's a lot happening. I think it's important to remember also, there are different countries, the dynamics are different, the social environment is different. There's pros and cons. I mean, France and Paris has changed, and Macron's done a number of things. The banks and the insurers in France have also changed, and their approach is different, which is important, I guess, to the fintech scene. We have Brexit here. They've had protests every Saturday in Paris for 25 or 26 weeks, I think. So I don't think it's kind of like zero hero or perfect world in either case.
Yeah, I mean, like French people know how to protest, right? I think that's it's like ours are queuing. French people just protesting, isn't it?
We're pretty good at it. We have a pretty competing police force as well, who's pretty good at of managing protests. And the name actually is just a historical. It's slightly more poetic than your interference. It was the building was called Halles Fraissinet, and so they took the first letter. So it's a nod to the place rather than.
I mean, I think it's the worst name ever. Like Station F, it just sounds awful to me. Like it's
post-apocalyptic.
Yeah, no, almost. Yeah, it feels like it's like 1984 or something. Something out of that, right?
Well, no, I think it's almost like you're approaching fucked. Like it's like station fucked. Like it's like so. But
if you think, David, you think going forward is actually quite clever because when they expand, they can go do the Station G
and like all the way through.
So it's got a lot of room for development.
Growth. Yeah. But like seriously, I think it's really interesting. There's so many places that are queuing up to try and steal the crown from London, and like you say, we're sort of allowing that by Brexit and whatnot and everything that's kind of going on. But, I think the ecosystem isn't just made by kind of these types of accelerators. We need to see wholesale improvements in the amount of investment that's going in, capital that's actually going in via, French fintechs. And I don't think we're seeing that yet. But maybe this is the type of thing that lays down the foundation for it. But I think to your point, though, this is what we sort of saw in, level 39 in 2012 in the UK, right? We saw these things kind of coming through, and these types of changes have led to the ecosystem that we've seen here today.
Proximity to finance is probably one of the most important things for fintech. I mean, and I think that it's very hard for fintech to grow up in an area where there's no big financial companies.
I disagree with that.
Well, I'll give the counter, but
Yeah.
I think that the reality is that proximity to knowing what's going on is really important. Now, the other side of it, though, which we're seeing, is the crowding out effect. Because as all the big financial institutions start to build their businesses and start to hire developers and hire AI and hire UX people, that is crowding out some of the labor and some of the available staff. And I think there is an opportunity for fintech areas to grow away from the big financial areas because of the staff issue. But I think that proximity is quite powerful. And I don't think it's really surprising that the big fintech hubs are coming up in New York and London. Paris is a big financial center and has also been a very important center for the more technical side of finance, particularly the derivative market and some of the more technical pieces of finance. So I'm not surprised.
No, I mean, the reason I kind of interjected, I don't believe that you need to be near the banks or near financial services hubs to create successful fintech companies. I think that for me, it's a coincidence, an important coincidence, but really, I think it's the question of the people that were working in these financial services organizations, working in banks, but also interested in tech, and is that crossover of talent that created fintech as a thing in London. That's my strong view anyway. So we could have easily started GoCardless in Paris or in Dublin or in London. I don't think it was the fact that we were close to the banks that really mattered. But I do take your point. There is a lot of financial services expertise in London, and it's the combination of that expertise with the more technical expertise that is really important. But that talent exists not just in London, right? It exists all around the world.
I think we do have a unique level of technology talent, creative talent here. I think it's interesting as well, the difference between B2C and B2B, right? Yeah. So, I think in the B2B sense, I think it's like nettles and dock leaves, really like you find them close to one another because the B2B players from a fintech perspective are arguably solving problems for big financial services organizations.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a category of B2B, right? Like, for example, GoCardless, we don't sell to the banks at all. So, if your customers are financial services organizations, then obviously being close to the customer is always important. But there's a lot of both B2B and B2C fintech companies that are serving a much wider audience.
So I got to move us on, but I think it's going to be one to keep watching. Definitely policy has been a key strategic advantage for the UK for quite some time, and France is definitely making statements of intent. We shall come back to this one, I'm sure. But